Hi, this is Jimmy Matlosz. I wrote and I will be directing Burden of the Wolf, a thriller, young adult based film to be made in Spokane, Washington in April of 2023. The film centers around four teens who lose their friend to a wolf like creature. The sheriff is out hunting wolves. The teens have their own theories and their own concepts that they have fun exploring, kind of like a Scooby Doo thing, if you will. So the film is the idea behind the film is really to make a Spielberg style, if you will, type film, fun, mysterious, some scary parts, a lot, entertaining, a little bit of romance, a little bit of young people versus old people, and try to make a memorable film with a wonderful cast and a wonderful crew, and have a lot of fun doing.
Welcome to the Downing Cut. Today I'm sitting down with Jimmy Matlosz, a filmmaker who's worn many hats, a cinematographer, a director, a writer, a journalist. Jimmy has worked on hundreds of projects such as commercials, feature films, documentaries, and he's even penned 5 marketable screenplays and a TV pilot. He's here to talk about his latest project, Burden of the Wolf, a gripping new film being developed right here in the Pacific Northwest. Please visit burdenofthewolf.com for more and check out the pitch deck to see how you can support this incredible project. Jimmy, how are you?
That was awesome, Joe. I
Thank
need to
you.
hire you.
I'm prepared.
You need to be my pitch man.
Let's talk about you've worked as a cinematographer and director, writer, and even a journalist. How has that shaped your storytelling?
Honestly, my kids probably shape my storytelling more than anything.
And how is that?
Well, the wonderful thing about having kids is you get to be a kid again, and you get to start from an intellectual point of view, reading everything from Dr. Seuss to watching Harry Potter to watching all the movies we grew up with, and it changes the way we watch them and the way we analyze them. And I think that's really where it came from. I really started to embed myself deeper into films because of them. And part of it is, yeah, you want to watch the movie, you want to remember, you want to sort of censor them for as long as you can, because look, they're going to be exposed to everything. But
Yeah.
there's something beautiful about retaining that purity of innocence of children. I remember when my kids saw the Incredibles, yeah, and that was the first time my kids had ever seen violence in a movie to speak of, and that was of
Wow.
course extreme violence. So anyway, so I
Yeah.
remember the first
Yeah.
time my kids saw the Incredibles in the theater, they were literally jaws agape. They were scared. And the kids next
Yeah.
to us were laughing and screaming and loving the whole thing because they obviously had been exposed to it. So everything I've learned up to having kids was mixed together with having kids and learning the process. I always wanted to be a storyteller. I can go all the way back to high school when I used to jot down little stories, but I was terrible at English. I don't have good clerical skills. So people like us sort of get pushed out of the room. And then you find
Mm.
out that, like, I think it's Stephen J. Bochco is dyslexic, and then you find
Oh,
out like Danny Elfman is an amazing composer, but not a great musician.
oh,
Yeah, and
interesting.
this is
I
what
didn't
I
know that.
told. Danny, no offense.
Yeah.
This is what one of your
Yeah.
guys told me. I love his music. So it was interesting that the more I learned that, the more I realized, okay, I can be a writer even if I'm not amazing with grammar and punctuation, and I can tell stories and I can spin a tale.
Let's talk about Burden of the Wolf. What's the film about, and what genre would you say it falls
So it's
into?
definitely thriller. It was inspired by when I wrote it. It was inspired by taking the template of Jaws, the blueprint of Jaws, and writing a movie. And that was one of the piece of advices that I'd gotten from another writer: take a template of a movie and write your movie like that movie. Just don't do it exact. So
Yeah.
opening scene is very much like Jaws, but not. Now that everybody knows that, anybody who sees it or reads it is gonna be like, oh yeah, I can see that. Prior to that, hopefully not, right? So the movie is a werewolf genre, and that came about because I used to rent a cabin in the woods, and I don't do horror movies. And American Werewolf in London, I don't consider a horror movie, just like Jaws isn't a horror movie. I think they're character studies. I think there's a lot of depth there. So taking those sort of concepts and ideas, mashing them together, and then I realized, well, I like things grounded in reality. I like Jaws is a fantasy because a shark doesn't really do that. It doesn't prey on humans. It just preys on prey. So taking that concept, like no one would ever believe there's a such thing as a werewolf. Who would they blame if something like this happened? They would blame wolves. And then I
Mm.
started to do a deep dive into wolves and found out wolves are completely harmless. You actually have a greater
Just
chance of dying from a mosquito bite than you do from a wolf. You have a greater chance of dying from a domestic dog. And trust me, I absolutely love dogs. Never met a dog I didn't like, but domestic dogs are exponentially more dangerous. So I started to spin this tale of this story of, and I love the teenager genre. I love the Spielberg genre, the one that I grew up with, and probably you, and then my kids, and everybody loves Goonies, Back to the Future, and then
yeah.
even Harry Potter is that teen genre, right? That we all loved.
Mhm.
So I wanted to take that and experiment with that, and I was writing it when my kids were teenagers, so I could access that energy, that dialogue, and that feeling. So I mashed it all up and then wrote the first version in 30 days. It was a goal. I don't know how good that one is because I haven't seen it in a couple of years, but now I'm probably on version 30 or 40. I don't know.
What inspired the story and for you to just focus on wolves? And was there a moment where you thought this has to be a film?
Well, writing it, I mean, literally from the first word, actually, it started as a text messaging back and forth to my buddy Ryan. It was
Nice.
Halloween night, first time I hadn't spent Halloween with my kids. We were texting back and forth, and he's like, "Too bad you don't like horror. You live in the cabin in the woods." And that's when we talked about American Werewolf in London. That's when I said, "Oh, werewolf movie." And now here's the twist: is that I used to only spend a week, 1 week out of every month in that cabin,
Oh,
and I just popped into my head. Well, what if somebody were cursed to be a werewolf? They only turn into a werewolf once a month during the full moon. What if they got a cabin in the woods to deal with being a werewolf? That's simple. And then the wolf,
are you secretly telling us something about yourself? You lived through this
yeah,
experience?
yeah. And years ago, I wanted to write a story about a bad lawyer.
Mm,
Lawyers that dedicate their lives to getting criminals off. So I kind of spun that into it. And then the wolves came about, like I said, just through logic. Like no one would ever believe there's such thing as a werewolf.
yeah.
And then the more I studied wolves in general, I read American Wolf, which is a great book. Never Cry Wolf, which was a huge influence, although a lot of people say it's fiction. There's a lot of fact in there about how wolves are treated and how they're seen by humans. And even I quote the book in literally the preface of the film. And we talked about that quote, and I can never remember because I'm terrible at remembering quotes. I know you threw it out
Yeah.
there. So yeah, a combination of all those things. And then so when I met my fiance, she's very much into environmentalism and awareness and advocacy. And then I thought, how cool would it be to do a fictional narrative film with some awareness and advocacy thrown into it without being heavy-handed,
Yeah.
just being soft-handed. And then it dawned on me, what if when Peter Benchley did Jaws, if they had thrown something about that in there, because he lamented for his entire life that he had demonized sharks with that movie.
How did it all come together? I know Washington Filmworks played a role. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So over the course of writing this and developing it, I then during that time period, I became a Washington State resident. And Washington has these wonderful film incentives through Washington Filmworks, wafilmworks.org, I think it is. Um, and they support filmmaking in the state. They have a low budget um, program that you can submit to, and if your feature film has a budget of less than $1 million, you would submit all your paperwork. And I'm talking, this is extensive paperwork. We had to have an entire proper budget made. I'm not talking a couple lines on a spreadsheet. I'm talking 20 pages or more.
Wow.
The first person
Yeah.
that did the budget was Rich Cowan with North by Northwest, or I think he's Northwest Package now. He did the first draft. Then Jennifer Gatz and I sat down and went over the entire budget line by line, and we submitted that. I had to submit my bio and my credentials. We had to submit the screenplay. We had to submit how we thought we were going to raise money, what our plan was to make the movie, where we were going to make the movie, how many days we thought we were going to shoot. So many elements. The truth is, like, I've in my entire career, I've never seen a program like this. I've seen contests that you pay for. Um, I've seen organizations that um, seemingly support filmmakers, um, but nothing like this that seemed just even level playing field across the board. Now, someone could say, well, you've got 36 years experience. Well, 36 years experience doesn't do me any good in LA. If I submitted to something like this in LA, I would get trounced by people with more experience and more connection. Mm-hmm. So that said, the Washington Filmworks program is stellar. They are incredibly supportive. So what they've done is they've earmarked 30% of our budget for return to investors. We can get another 10% if we film in smaller towns or smaller cities, and incorporate um, less represented community.
What stage is the project in right now? And then I've heard you're starting to gear up for production in 2026.
Correct. So once Washington Filmworks accepted my script and accepted me into the program, they've earmarked $375,000 in a return after the audit. So now I have a deadline of early October to raise $998,000. We're looking for investors across the board. We're looking for big investors. As much as I would love $10,000 investors, I need $100,000 investors. And so we're slated for an April filming because I don't want to film in the middle of winter in Spokane. That's where we're going to film the whole movie. I don't think it's fair to anyone. It's also more expensive. We have a lot of night exteriors. So as far as investors go, or people getting involved, that's something we should cover. So an investor is somebody obviously who can afford to spend and live without X amount of dollars, $100,000, 200, 500, $1 million for an extended period of time. If you're not that person, there's also, this is how people become producers. This is how people become associate producers. This is how actors can move their career needle further. Is being part of a process like this. And I'm not saying mine's the only one. You may say, Jimmy, I don't want to work with you. I want to work on Joe's film. And that's cool. But I think as a community, people need to learn that filmmaking is a community thing. And getting involved in a project that you believe in and a person you believe in as much as you can. It's volunteer work in the beginning. And you got to hope that it's going to be returned to you. But at the same time, you will get experience. In filmmaking, unfortunately, we all do a lot of free work. It's just nature of the beast. I assume in construction they probably do and other things, but our business seems to be one of the few where a lot of people do a lot of free work and you hope you get returned. So, to cap that, it's like find somebody if and then there's the other part of it. So if you know somebody who is interested in spending money on filmmaking, getting involved in filmmaking, you get a reward for that. In business in general, someone who brings money to the table gets 10%. Not always guaranteed that 10%. It's negotiable, of course, but 10% is usually the minimum. And that's there's a lot of people. That's all they do is they will pool together 10 investors to build a skyscraper, and then they get 10% across the board off the top. So it's pretty cool.
That's cool. So
wow.
If you have the finances, they can invest in your film and receive 10% credit in return. And then for those who don't have the finances but still want to support you, they can become an associate producer and spread the word. And then how else can they participate?
Yeah, I mean, there are possibilities for people being cast in the film, of course. No guarantees. I think you have to be realistic about that. Joe, you're an actor, It's like, yes, I want to be in this movie, but there's no role for me. or
Yeah,
maybe there is, right? But so it's a long shot for anybody involved. But at the same time, I do believe that any actor should be considering more than just acting. If you consider like Matt and Ben, I mean, they're a great example of two guys that started way before Goodwill Hunting. They were doing plays, they were working together all the time. They created an energy between them, and there's more than just Matt and Ben. Matt and Ben are the face. There's probably other people in the peripheral. I
sure.
mean, Casey's in there, of course, and so on and so forth. So, getting involved with filmmakers and checking your ego at the door and not saying, well, I don't want to help anybody else because I want to make my movie is not a good plan. But saying, I want to help other people so I can make my movie is a cool thing. And for me, like
Hmm.
Joe, literally, if you said to me today, Jimmy, I got a film I'm working on. Can I consult with you? Can you help me make this film? I would be all in. Now, if you ask me to help you raise money, that's a conflict, right? Because I'm trying to raise my own money.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, if you could give me your Rolodex, like, dude, let's be
Right,
honest.
right.
But I will show you what I'm doing. I will show you how I got to this point in my filmmaking process and in my fundraising.
Yeah. And I think that's a key thing. I think that's how you become a mentor for people who want to be mentored. And I've gone through that experience where I've worked with a Tim Earnhardt. I've worked on a number of his films, and because he was so efficient in his processes, and he always kept his crew to a certain size, he became my mentor. And it's like, how do I replicate that? And so that's great that you're offering that as well. Now, you touched a little bit on casting. Are there any roles or names that are locked in yet?
None that are locked in. We are, and I'm cautious to even mention a name because no one's locked in. But we have had, we did get a response back from one of our chosen talent. Uh, she apparently heard about the Washington Filmwork incentive when it was announced. She has a copy of the script and she reached out to Rich Cowan and said, "What I understand, the text said I'm in."
Nice.
So I'm still waiting to meet with Rich to find out what that means. Because for me, it's like I want to be on this podcast talking about it, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't want to betray her, so I won't. And then
Sure.
there's another young indigenous character, that actor who we talked about actually in our last podcast, Kusem Goodwind, and I have not had conversations with him, no response, but we did make him an offer,
Awesome.
and we would love to work with him. I would absolutely love to work with him. He fits so many aspects of this film serendipitously.
Hmm.
I mean, I
Yeah.
needed an athletic kid who was modeled after my son, and then through the process of writing, I turned him into an indigenous character because there is one other indigenous actor in the film, and I thought it would balance it out a little bit more to have a young and an old. And then when I saw him in Resball, it just made sense. And then I found out he was Nez Perce, which my film has Nez Perce in it. I'm like, okay, this is serendipity. I need to meet this kid.
What is the timeline from now to premiere?
Well, ideally, since it is a thriller type film, and some may label it horror, I don't care if they label it horror because if it gets people to watch it, wonderful. So you're talking a fall release of 26 if we film in the spring of 26.
So production starts spring of 26. Pre-production. Are we you're in pre-production now?
We're in development right now. Pre-pro would really be
Oh,
I think when people start getting paid, raise
okay.
money, and we can actually pay people to do their jobs.
And then what's your vision for Burden of the Wolf once it's completed? Are you going to go to festivals? Are you going to go to distribution?
I'm definitely going the distribution route. Festivals, I'm cautious with, um, because I feel like that world has been tainted a little bit by big money. I have spoken to one of our Pacific Northwest theater owners, independent theater owners, and he said literally straight up, "I will totally play your movie." And he owns, I think he said, 3 to 5 theaters with that throughout the area. And I like the idea of, as Ava DuVernay did back in the day, she hand carried her film to theaters. and did Q&As and conversation. You know, you want to make it conversational. You don't want to make a Q&A where there's a wall between you and the audience. I love the idea
Yeah.
of breaking down that wall and really interacting with people.
So, with all the content that's out there right now, why is this film something that audiences need right now?
I don't know that anybody needs a film, um, but people like entertainment. Proven again and again. I mean, Superman is like making millions, hundreds of millions. So apparently, people like being entertained,
Yeah.
and this is what I do for a living, um, and I love doing this for a living. So if you put those two together, it's like if you love doing something and people want to see what you love doing, why not try to do the best at what you do to show people something that they will enjoy? You know, everybody dreams that their film will have legs, that their film in 20 years people will still watch the film. I mean, Jaws just celebrated 50 years, and
Mhm.
while it's not a perfect film, it really is an example of some of the best filmmaking you'll ever see, behind the scenes and in the final film.
If you could leave our listeners with one ask, what would it be?
The one ask would be number one, we are looking for investors. So first and foremost, we're looking for big money investors up to $1 million we need to raise. Secondly, if you don't have that money, if you don't know somebody, we're looking for associate producer types who can help us raise those funds.
What's the best way people can follow you?
Well, I do have a regular newsletter I put out on LinkedIn about entrepreneurialism and especially about filmmaking. I posted most of my work on Instagram, and I do come in and out of Facebook randomly. Those are the three platforms I'm basically on.
Well, Jimmy, this has been great. And to everyone listening, head over to burdenofthewolf.com to see the pitch deck and find out how you can be part of bringing this story to life. And don't forget to follow Jimmy on IMDb and keep up with his incredible work. And everything will be in the show notes. All right. See you next time, Jimmy.